much smaller, like 4 people versus 15. It'll be different, but here's to at least being together to the whatever extent we can. I guess, Pamela, the first thing we need to do is to call roll.
Yes, please.
Would you like to do that?
Sure. I'm just
Okay.
going to announce everyone's last name for sake of efficiency. Arano Ortiz,
Here.
Arenas,
Here.
Asim, not yet. Bradley,
Here.
Cronin. I see her.
Yeah.
I know Cheryl's here. I can see her on the screen. Douglas,
Here.
Dorsina Fori.
Here.
He's here. I'm sorry. I know that you are. Mr. Gallery,
Yes.
John Heiler.
Here.
I know Mr. Hawkins will be absent today, and Ms. Tyler.
Here.
Thank
Hi,
you.
China.
We have a quorum.
Okay, that's great. Next thing is we have to do exactly the same thing again. I would accept a motion to, absent any additions, changes, recommendations, whatever, to approve the minutes for the last meeting held September 29th. If there are any comments, let me know. Otherwise, I'd take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Pamela, you want to do it again, please?
Sure. Evelyn,
Yes.
Samawa,
Yes.
Jabari. I don't know if he's on yet. Nope. Okay. Bradley,
Yes.
Cronin,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Fori.
Yes.
Thank you, Linda. Gallery,
Yes.
John Heiler,
Yes.
China Tyler.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. We're rolling, David. We're going to pass it over to you for the bulk of the agenda and look forward to it. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a note to members of the public who are watching or viewing this morning, that if you want to make a comment during public comment later in the meeting, you can submit that via either the Q&A, you can just type in your name or the question. You can do that via Q&A or by the chat if it's available to you. Just that little piece of housekeeping. Good morning, trustees. Our report today will largely be a series of updates on current reality and different aspects of our services and operations. We're happy to obviously go deeper on any of these topics with you. And we do hope that this will provide a new foundation for future meetings when we go deeper into proposed budgets for next year and other items around strategy as we strive to continue to keep operating and to keep a focus on what equitable recovery will mean for the city of Boston and our role in it. There are two highlights I want to bring your attention to. And one is the opening of the Roxbury branch. So we were able to execute a soft opening just about 2 weeks ago, which was covered with a great press article in the Bay State Banner, really highlighting parts of the branch and services that at this point the public is not able to go in and see, but we're able to get some press coverage, and they have now joined all of the branches offering BPL to go service. The second part of this, which we will put out in conjunction with the mayor's office over the next couple of weeks, will be a virtual tour of the branch with highlights by some staff and some stakeholders. So we're really trying to fill in the gap of not being able to be inside in person. And then the third part of the launch will be an in-person celebration when it's safe to do so, perhaps maybe on its anniversary of the opening, depending on where we are during 2021. So we're thrilled to have this branch back, the former Dudley branch, the Roxbury branch at Nubian Square, for the members of the public, and we look forward to being able to facilitate the staff serving the local community there. The second highlight that I want to share with you is And this is both a sharing a highlight and a thank you to the trustees. We had our employee appreciation event last week, where we, on an annual basis, in particular, recognize members of staff who have reached 25 years of service. And we were able to recognize Amy Manson-Reese, Becky Manos, Julio Chang, and Jim Tran, all of whom have reached 25 years of service, as well as recognize other members of staff for their service. And many of the trustees were able to offer greetings virtually. So thank you so much for doing that. And we were able to play all your greetings at the opening of the meeting. So just two really important and I think upbeat moments in the operating reality of the last several weeks. Current operating reality remains largely unchanged. We are focused on BPL to go service throughout the system. We continue to offer a large range of our services online. We have begun to allow and facilitate people for whom technology is a challenge to connect with us by a phone and a little bit in person. Several of the branches are doing local outreach for whom, just the online experience does not work, or they have challenges with what we call the digital equity gap. We will be launching an old school campaign in the next couple of weeks, mailing out postcards, putting up flyers, really to get the word out about the BPL services. Because if you're not coming by the branch, you might not realize that we're actually even open for BPL to go, or if you do want to access these great services that are available online, you might not know. And so we want to get the word out. And we think that certainly as we at some point get over the challenge as a city of the current trajectory of the case numbers and get more deeply into a recovery pattern, that we will need to double down on reaching out to those who are most in need of our service, who have most difficulty connecting with us online. And this is work that the staff are ready to do and enthusiastic about doing, and ensuring that we don't simply rely on the success of BPL to go or our online services. And so at this point, I'm going to invite our first set of guests in my report, which is our partners at YW Boston. In light of the racial equity statement, commitment, and work that we did over the summer and you ratified at the last meeting, we've moved forward with our partnership with YW Boston to help the organization confront issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also incorporate those as principles into our work going forward, really through a lens of transformation. Amanda, if you would switch to slides, and we'll invite Kamara Sika and Everett Shorey, representing YW Boston, to give a brief introduction of who they are and what the scope of work ahead is with the Boston Public Library. Kamara and Everett, welcome.
Good morning, and thank you, David. My name is Kamara Sika. Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Kamara Sika. I'm the Chief Programs Officer at YW Boston. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a lifelong resident of Dorchester and have gone through the Boston Public School System, and also a former school librarian and have a master's degree in library and information science, but have done most of my career working with schools, organizations, and a variety of institutions, and thinking about curricular changes, organizational change, and strategic renewal, and really designing equitable practices within institutions in a variety of ways, both thinking about technology integration, but also explicitly thinking about racism and sexism within institutions. And I'll allow my colleague Everett to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Everett Shorey. I am a consultant with YW Boston. I come out of a corporate consulting background with a focus on organization and change management. I've been working with YW Boston for the last couple of years in their Inclusion Boston program, which is what we're working on with the BPL.
And we can go to the next slide. You can skip to the. So YW Boston, like all YWCAs in the nation's mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Every YWCA could do that in different ways. Many of them have domestic violence shelters or housing, childcare centers, a variety of programs for both women and children. But the YWCA in Boston's focus is on creating inclusive environments within organizations to create racial and gender equity within the city of Boston. So really recognizing that to create the change that we'd like to see in the city of Boston, we do need to leverage institutions, both bigger, broader, nonprofit, for-profit, government agencies to really create the change that we'd like to see. Next slide. And so the way that we do that is focusing specifically on thought leadership, advocacy, and diversity, equity, and inclusion services. And so the services that we will be providing and explicitly talking to you about today is Inclusion Boston. That is the program that Boston Public Library is working with us on. Next slide, please. And so we are taking a two-phased approach with the Boston Public Library. Today, I will touch upon the full scope, but really dig deeper into the phase one. Your phase one team includes me, the Chief Program Officer, Everett Shorey, our organizational consultant, Sarah Foudy, our Director of Research and Evaluation, and Sharon Mailer, our Organizational Development Manager. And so this team expertise is really to think about the organization as a whole and getting the voices and through to get us to get an understanding of what the baseline is at the Boston Public Library. Next slide. And so for the full program, the ways in which that we conduct our change is really thinking about the organization as an ecological model. So there is all the individuals within the organization and recognizing that there's knowledge, attitudes, and behavioral shifts that need to happen for individuals, as well as policies, practices, and structural changes that need to happen at the organizational level. And the interactions of the individuals with the policies and practices really need to be focused on. So we take this multi-pronged approach, and the way that we do that is through these 4 steps. And so the step 1, discovery and assessment, is really getting an understanding of your goals and the objectives, but also what the experience is of the folks that are within the organization. That is what our phase 1 is. We're getting an understanding of that, but also using this as an opportunity to determine who are the 25 people that will participate in developing a fine-tuned action plan with a variety of action steps, ownership, and recognizing what levels of support is necessary to create that change. We then take those 25 people through a dialogue series where they're doing significant work on themselves and thinking about their own racial identity, how those racial identities come together as groups, the history of race and racism, as well as thinking explicitly about the change that they can make within their own sphere of influence. So this cohort of people are the folks that we really expect to have influence within the Boston Public Library all throughout. So when we talk about power at YW, it's not just authority or positional power, but what are the relationships that people have to help to create the culture that is there. This group then designs an action plan, and they will be working with my colleague Sharon to fine tune that action plan. And then we at YW support and provide accountability, partnership, and resources to implement that action plan after a 12-month period. Next slide. And so digging into what that phase 1 on the discovery and assessment is, it is really about communications and ensuring that it's clear, transparent communication about the process and the selection of where we are going with the organization, and really helping everyone to be on the same page. That clear communications is one of the key functions in any change that is necessary. When we're talking explicitly about surveys, what we're doing is really sending out surveys to the entire organization, as well as members of partners that work with the Boston Public Library. We've just closed the surveys last Friday, and we have collected over 250 surveys that are folks both saying that they'd like to participate in interviews and focus groups, as well as people speaking about what their experience has been at the Boston Public Library. We will also be conducting 25 interviews and holding 5 different focus groups. As of right now, we have about 180 people that have either been nominated as people that we should talk to, or they have raised their hand and said that they'd like to talk to us. We will be able to capture everyone within those 5 focus groups and the interviews. And so really ensuring that we are getting as many voices to be a part of the process is a fundamental part of the work that we're doing. I believe that is my last slide. Are there any questions?
Hi, Camera. This is Evelyn. How are you? I have a question. The 150 surveys that collected, that represents what percentage of all surveys?
So it was 250 surveys that were received. So we sent it out.
250, sorry.
Yep, 250, and we sent it out, I believe it was about close to 400. So that puts us in about the 60% range, 55% range, which is actually pretty high for surveys to date. And we have pretty good representation of different roles in the surveys as well.
How do you go about selecting those, I'm going to call them the influencers, the 25 people? How do you sort of, what's the method to the madness as to how you select those people? How do you know who they are?
That is through the variety of conversations that we have in the interviews, as well as the focus groups, as well as in the surveys. We openly ask folks to say, who are the people we should talk to? So that's a nomination process, as well as asking people if they would like to also speak. And so the more folks got nominated, the more we saw that they were seen as influencers within the organization. So it's really an art of looking at all the ways in which we're collecting information, including kind of conversations that arise. We've had multiple manager meetings, as well as meetings with some of the senior leadership. And so really thinking about who are the folks that come up pretty frequently in all of these kinds of meetings, as well as who folks have nominated, really helps us to understand who's holding some of that influence in the BPL.
Thank you. One last question, I promise. And then the phase 1, what's the period, or you don't rush it, you don't, like, how do you, typically what's the duration of the first phase?
The first phase is about 2 months. So we are halfway through the process. We're scheduling interviews and focus groups now. Our goal is to have the focus groups and interviews wrapped up by mid-December.
One more. So this is focused on partners in our staff. How do you gather information about our communities, and are you going to tackle that, or is it only within the internal confines of the library?
So this phase is focusing specifically on the internal aspects of the library, recognizing that the ways in which we interact with one another within our workplaces really then shows up in the ways in which we interact with our patrons as well. And so focusing specifically on what the culture is at the BPL as a staff person, and then thinking about how that then trickles out would be a later phase.
I mean, Evelyn, in some ways, it's been many years since we've done a comprehensive survey of our patrons and users, and I think there are multiple topics on which it's kind of becoming high time that we'd like to do that again to inform strategy going forward. So for this and for other reasons, not necessarily for today or even for January, I think we need to iterate towards a more comprehensive touch point with the broader community.
Yeah, no, and I get the strategy, and that's the reason I was asking, because you wanna, it's like the airplane, right? You need to have the oxygen mask first before you can help the other one. So no, it's fine. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Are there other questions for Kamara and Everett at this point in time? Our main goal today was to introduce you and give you a sense of the process and the journey that we're engaged in, and that this work will dovetail and go parallel with other activities that we've already committed to. And so what we will exit this phase of the process with is an action plan that incorporates what comes out of the YW Boston with what the library has itself already committed to.
I had a question, please, which is in terms of, in terms of the culture obviously exists in language and it exists in how people, in the relationships that people have. I'm wondering, is there, as you do these surveys, themes emerge? Various themes emerge which say something about who we are. And I'm wondering, how does that, how will you ensure that aligns with our mission? Or maybe we need to, we have an outward facing mission, but maybe there's something else that might be missing from that doesn't allow people to feel seen and heard, and all the other empowering statements that you have.
I think that's a part of what we're looking to understand, right? So getting those themes and then looking at, is this what the experience is that you'd like for people who work at the BPL? How do we then take this into consideration and utilize this information, empower this group to think about this information, the action steps that you said you've committed to do, and really pulling together a comprehensive action plan to create the cultural shift that's necessary. So that's not that the way that we do our work is really capacity building and helping you all to be able to do that. Not that we come in and tell you explicitly how to do it. So we're your coach, we're your guide, we're providing the frameworks, resources, and support so that you'll be able to continue that work, because the more people who know how to do this explicitly and have an equity lens, the better it is for all of us.
Thank you.
I also want to emphasize part of what Kamara has been saying. The work, the part of the point of that 25-person group is to really dig in and answer some of the questions that you were just asking. So rather than bringing in a solution from the outside, that group in those last several steps is designed to think about what specific actions does the BPL need to take in order to achieve its organizational change goals. So it's a change management lens and a strategy lens as much as a training and human development lens.
Thank you.
Hey, David.
Lynn.
I know that we have, I think we meet like every other month or something, and this phase is only 2 months.
Yeah.
As themes emerge and communications are issued, can the trustee be part of that mailing list or some executive summary?
Certainly, I think our yes. And
yes.
I believe that, although I don't have it in front of me, the Equity Action Plan calls us to be transparent about the work that we're doing, and part of that is via the trustees. So that's absolutely in alignment.
All right, cool. Thank you.
We're also happy to take suggestions from the trustees, perhaps offline, about how you would like to be involved more directly in this work as we go into, say, the phases beyond this assessment work, which is really taking the temperature and looking at where we are as an organization against a standards and set of principles of equity and inclusion and diversity. Well, thank you very much, Kamara and Everett, for joining us. I certainly welcome your attendance and participation with us, and feel both excited and challenged to do this work and to do this work seriously. So thank you. At this point, Amanda will move to the next slide on the President's report. And I think this takes us to another opportunity, which is to focus on the South End Branch Community Room. And we'd like to have Yvette Jarrow, the President of the Friends of the South End Library, brief us on this opportunity. And then I'll give some context and ask the trustees for a vote. Yvette, welcome.
Thank you, President Leonard, Chairman Gallery, and the trustees for this opportunity to present our Friends of the South End Library's proposal to name the community room at the branch in honor of Marlene Nienhaus, who recently retired from the board after dedicating almost 14 years to our library, its park, and the community. Marlene truly loves the city, the South End, and its library. And after being a key player in the renovation of Titus Sparrow Park, she turned her incredible energy to the library park, which was in significant disrepair. In 2008, by recruiting friends and neighbors, she founded the Friends Group and set out to get the park and the library renovated and improved. Her advocacy during the periods of budget cutting under the previous administration supported the continuing existence of the South End Library and its park as an important community asset. Her most recent accomplishments were a highly successful community appeal, providing significant funding for the branch refresh of 2019-20. And then just this month, the planting of thousands of bulbs in the library park for a magnificent display in 2021. Prior to leaving the Fossil board, Marlene, as a true leader, expanded the board in preparation for the future and the continuation of successful programs she had created, such as the highly popular South End Writes Author Talk series. And I personally thank her for preparing me for my role. Fossil has now fulfilled the requirements for naming a BPL room and has submitted the required documents to the trustees clerk, Pamela Carver, with thanks for her guidance. We are grateful to the mayor, Councillor Flynn, and the city council, President Leonard, as well as the Fossil board members for their support of this well-deserved honor of Marlene. Thank you, trustees, for your time and consideration of our proposal this morning.
So I would just like to confirm that we do in fact have all of the documents in place to allow this vote to go forward. I certainly have had in my official role the opportunity to work with Marlene, and can confirm that she has been a staunch advocate for the branch libraries and for the South End in particular. And the library administration also supports the vote going forward. So Mr. Chairman, you can open for questions or comments or move the vote.
Yeah, anybody have any questions? I mean,
Well, I just want to add to what David said. Every meeting that she had ever attended, the professionalism, the caring, the compassion, she always showed it. And she was always, she's just a really good addition to the whole library system, because what she accomplished there influenced a lot of the other friends. And I think she was a real great role model. So I was always appreciative of her showing up at our meetings and being so engaged.
yeah, I echo that, John, and I think David and Pamela and I maybe a couple of other of us were able to be there. In fact, it was maybe one of the last public events that we had in the system when we did the refresh. And that would not have happened without your leadership and collaboration with all of your compatriots, really led by Marlene and others over the years. So, and I agree. Marlene has been even more broadly interested in the library as a whole for as long as I've been involved. So I echo what John said.
I'll just add, as a long time serving trustee, I've seen Marlene almost at every board meeting that I've ever attended. And I think she could claim perfect attendance to our board of trustee meetings, given her commitment to the library system, but also to the South End. So I'm really glad to see this recognition for her.
Without intending to cut anyone else off, if you want to add something, feel free. But otherwise, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to go forward with naming of the room for Marlene.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Pamela.
Yes. Evelyn? Evelyn? Zamawa?
Yes.
Asim?
Sorry, I thought I said yes, Pamela.
Thank you. I got it, Evelyn.
Okay,
Bradley?
thank you.
Yes.
Cronin?
Yes.
Douglas?
Yes.
Josina Fori?
Yes, sorry, yes.
That's okay. Bob?
Yes.
John Heiler?
Yes.
And Ms. Tyler?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is approved.
Here, here. Yvette, thank you again as well.
Thank you.
Indeed, thank you, and all of the friends. And I think Marlene's work is representative of a spirit of commitment to the library throughout the system among the Friends group. So I think through recognizing Marlene, we're also recognizing many others who are present and perhaps unnamed, but equally as valued. And I love the fact that we can have conversations where we don't always agree, but we can still be friends. So thank you, Yvette, for bringing this nomination forward. I'll now turn part of my agenda over to initially Michael Colford and Eamon Shelton for some brief updates on current services and operating reality, and then to Laura Ermshire, who will tell us some stats about current collection usage. Michael.
Good morning, trustees. Thank you, David. I just wanted to give a few quick updates and then talk about some of the amazing programming that's been going on throughout the system in these last couple of months. As David mentioned earlier, we're still very much participating in BPL to go, where the communities are picking up their holes for at curbside at the door pickup, and printing to go as well, where they can get documents printed for them. We are allowing computer use limited in the central library. That continues. We will be adding in reader services, research services, and Christine Business Library Innovation Center remain very busy answering phones and email reference questions. Branch staff are also taking calls. All the branches are open for phone calls. Most everything else is currently on hold at the moment as we wait to see what the numbers in the virus tell us. But we are doing our best to continue to provide content to our readers. And as I said, I just want to touch upon some of the virtual programming that's been going on across the system. This list is not meant to be comprehensive. These are just some really exciting and innovative highlights from across the system. For adults, we've continued our wide range of programs in the past couple of months, with more attendance than ever from all across the state and even the country. We've had 15 author talks and lectures, many hosted by David Leonard, in partnership with such organizations as the Leventhal Map Center, the Museum of African American History, the New England Historic Genealogical Society, the WGBH Forum, the Massachusetts State Library, and the Lowell Foundation. And we've had over 1,800 concurrent live viewers to all of these programs. We've had a poetry reading with the Black Seed Writers Group, a creative gathering of homeless, transitional, and recently housed writers. And for older adults, we have partnered with Beacon Hill Village and continued our own Never Too Late series featuring chair yoga, Tai Chi, author talks, and film discussions. Our community learning department has been working on Tech Goes Home distance learning, where participants get a Chromebook and are taught to use it virtually. And in the past, they received their Chromebook after the trainings were over. But of course now with the distance learning, they received their Chromebook first. The staff from the community learning departments, Kirstein Business Library and Innovation Center, and several branches ran this program, focusing on topics highlighting the small business development, workforce preparedness, COVID-19 resources, health, food, and older adult services in Boston, ways to order groceries and prescriptions online safely, and many more topics. Community learning has done a series of health and human services in the time of COVID-19 programming. They've worked with partner organizations to help provide opportunities for patrons to ask questions over Zoom on legal questions, health insurance, rules around eviction moratoriums, and they presented webinars on learning the basics of health insurance for Open Enrollment 2020 with the Mass Health and the Health Connector in English and Spanish. Know Your Rights, Rental Housing During the Pandemic and Legal Services Center, and a Climate Action for Everyone Learning Circle on climate change. In addition, our literacy services staff and ESL volunteers have successfully pivoted their work to a virtual environment where adult learners can continue practicing their English safely. They have been offering 8 different classes for different levels each week with strong attendance. In the area of youth services, for teens, our teen librarians in both Central and across the branches have been busy in the virtual space ever since we shut down. They've been engaging with teens online with weekly interactive gaming content on the popular social media platform Twitch, which has attracted over 150 followers. They have recently branched out to offer monthly young adult and middle grade book discussions on material voted on by their Twitch followers. This fall, Teen Central has offered a very successful author talk series with best-selling authors and illustrators such as Nick Stone, Ngozi Ukazu, and Leah Johnson, attracting hundreds of attendees. And the Teen Volunteer Program continues in a virtual environment for teens across the city to earn community service hours for school, as well as learning valuable and transferable skills for jobs. In children's services, Children's Library at Central continues their innovative programming with the formation of a new parents group, a weekly program that includes librarian-led rhymes and bounces for babies 0 to 12 months, guided discussions to build community among new parents who may feel isolated, and presentations from professionals about infant care. Their ongoing collaboration with the Department of Mental Health recently included a story time that encouraged young children to talk about their big feelings, and a panel for parents and caregivers with professional mental health advocates about resources for responding to mental health challenges in children. And in the branches, children's librarians and branches are very busy creating book bundles for parents and families to pick up when they use BPL to go. These librarians curated bundles of books are growing in popularity. We even have teachers requesting them for their classrooms. And the children's librarians are working harder than ever to engage with kids safely in person. Well, in this recent success, as this recent success at the Conley branch illustrates. The Conley branch did a Just a Minute Story Walk Halloween goodie bags program. It was a dynamic way for families to enjoy reading Just a Minute, a trickster tale and counting book by Yuyi Morales as they strolled down Center Street. Over 100 story walk maps and goodie bags were picked up at the branch and led families to over a dozen local businesses where the pages of the book were blown up and hung in their windows. Finally, virtual story times are available every day of the week, with nearly 20 different opportunities to enjoy a story time, including several linked to our grant-funded Future Readers Club, which focuses on early literacy. And I just wanted to say, with regard to the Roxbury branch, which David mentioned just opening, we are going to be probably in January to spotlight the nutrition lab and let people see it, even though they can't personally visit. We'll be doing a virtual chef series in the nutrition lab that we broadcast from that space. So there was a lot, but I didn't want to leave anything out because there are a lot of great highlights. When Eamon and Laura have finished, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Good morning, trustees. My name is Eamon Shelton. I'm the Director of Operations. I oversee the division that includes facility management, project management, IT, and security. Since the beginning of the pandemic, each of these departments has had to modify their traditional service models. The IT department, under Kurt Mansberger's leadership, helped the organization transition to be fully remote. They supported staff during this transition through help desk support and the rollout of new collaborative tools. Since the return to in-person service, they've collaborated with library services to introduce in-person computer use at the Central Library and the expansion of Wi-Fi at the branches, among other projects. In the security area, we have worked closely with our security contractor to adjust schedules to support the BPL to go service at all locations and have helped with the administration of our COVID-19 safety protocols at the Central Library. I have been particularly impressed with the performance of our staff in the facilities department. They are BPL's frontline workers, and they have been working consistently in person throughout the pandemic to keep our facilities operational and safe for the return of staff and the public. The custodians have adjusted to evolving COVID-19 protocols, increased the frequency of cleaning and disinfecting. Thankfully, we've been able to add critical new positions so that each branch has a dedicated custodian, which has been a long-term goal of the facilities department, and we're currently hiring for those jobs now. Our carpenters have been building plexiglass shields, and they, along with our painters, have made building modifications at branches and at the Central to better support services. Our laborers have stepped in when needed and have supported the work of all of the other groups to ensure that services weren't ever interrupted. Our shipping group have been delivering books and supplies throughout the city, all while being short-staffed. Our administrative staff have carefully managed our inventory of safety and cleaning supplies to ensure that we never ran out and that we had what we needed as we returned to in-person service. In fact, at one point, we were even helping to supply other city departments when some items became difficult to source. Later in the presentation, you will hear about the impressive and unprecedented slate of capital projects being led by Allison Ford, who also managed our return to in-person service. While the impacts of the pandemic have obviously been devastating, one bright spot is the way in which our operations staff have performed, adapted, and innovated during the crisis. With that, I'll take any questions, or perhaps at the end of Laura's presentation, we can I can take questions as well.
Let's just pause here for questions for either Michael or Eamon, and then proceed into Laura's trustees.
Well, I saw Purcell, I think, sent a comment out on chat, but I think on behalf of all of us, we want to thank both of you and your teams for what you've been doing. And I know we'll do that as well with Laura and the rest of the team as well. But it's pretty amazing that given everything, you know, we've all been faced with, I think a number of the trustees made these comments with Pamela, and thank you, Pamela, for putting the ability for us to thank the staff last week in that meeting. But you know, I just think you guys have done a great job through very difficult circumstances, and the flexibility of your teams, you know, is noteworthy. So we're not done. The challenges are going to be back out there, and sooner or later we'll have to remember how to get back to even normal, whatever that is. But in the interim, using the resources the way you have has been, I think, pretty incredible. So thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, could we just ask, like, how's the fatigue, you know, and how do they keep up, knowing that this is going to go on for a little while longer, the surges? And because I've been talking to other company heads, and it's starting to become, you know, trying to figure out how to battle the fatigue people are starting to feel. And, you know, how's your staff holding up?
I can comment on that. You know, as you all know, it's very individual. Some people are just dying to get back into the building and do work. Others are still very tense and anxious about the virus and what's going on. I think it's important for us to remain very vigilant, and we place the health of our staff and the public first and foremost in any of our conversations about expanding services. But yeah, people are stressed, and we try to manage that as best we can by you know, touching base with them as often as possible, whether they're working from home or coming into the library. But thank you for asking. It's definitely a challenging time for people.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael, it's Evelyn. Quick question, and I'm just relating this to, you know, my own industry. Do you guys foresee, I mean, what's the buzz among libraries? Do you foresee this continued digital collection increase to be more of the norm rather than an immediate pattern?
Well, let's save that for Laura, because I'm sure she's going to bring that up in her.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, and that's the
Sorry.
$64 million question as well, is where, how much of this is an acceleration of existing trends, how much of it is a new trend that will continue, and how much of it is a trend that we should balance by not perhaps overreacting to it as well. But we'll come back to that in a second. I would just like to echo Michael's response to Bob. I think the staff are, like other organizations, pretty much all over the map, and you know, it's very individual, and people are doing their best, and some people are really, really stressed, and you know, we're continuing, I think, to try and make tweaks to procedures and operating processes to ensure that we can move forward. Without the crystal ball that tells us which of those are you know, permanent changes, or which ones are simply for the duration of the pandemic itself. So you know, I think just encouraging people to stay the course, you know, and we can deal with some changes now and some changes later. But I think this is tough, and just listening to Michael and Eamon before we even get to Laura and some of our other operating teams, I feel proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far, while balancing that with you know, there's clearly more work to do, and more people that we're not able to reach yet that we need to in our next phase of services. So maybe with this point, we'll move on to Laura's presentation and take another pause after that. Laura,
Morning.
you have slides.
I do have slides. Good morning, trustees. My name is Laura Ermshire, and I'm the Chief of Collections for the Boston Public Library. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So David mentioned a little in the last meeting in September about the great work from our collection development and reader services and librarians across the system to promote our collections, whether it's online resources or physical collections. Since we closed, they've been cranking out recommendation lists and fun ways to explore the collections. So today I wanted to report a little bit on the usage of our collections. So since March 16th, we've had over 57,000 new e-card registrations. We've had over 162,000 physical items checked out since we began BPL to go in June. And we've had over 2.3 million items that have been borrowed across our digital platforms and formats. And when you're comparing that usage to the same time last year, our e-card registrations are up 24%. Our physical collection checkouts, as you might expect, are down 49%, and our online collection usage is up 37%. Next slide, please. I wanted to dive in a little more to the collection usage. So this chart shows the first quarter circulation of last fiscal year and this fiscal year as comparison. So looking at the bottom, that's FY20, so that's last year. And the blue is the checkouts of our physical collection, and the orange is the checkouts of our digital collection. And you can see from the graph that it's about a 50-50 split. And I've spoken to you about that in previous meetings, how we were kind of at an inflection point of seeing the same usage for physical and digital materials. And now when you compare it to this year, and that's the top bar for FY21, our total circulation didn't actually go down that much. It's only about 80,000 less out of 1.4 million from the previous year. But you can see the proportion of physical and digital has dramatically changed. Digital collections are making up over 73% of our total circulation. And excuse me. Diving into these numbers a little bit further and looking at how people are using our physical collections, DVDs usage as total collections has gone down pretty dramatically. Last year, DVDs made up 20% of our total circulation, and this year it's only 8.7%. And on the flip side, we've seen fiction have a huge rise, and it was 32% of our total circulation last year, and now it's up to 42%. Looking at the age breakdown of our collections, across the system, when you divide up the total circulation, about 55% is adult materials, 40% is children, and 5% is teen. And that's the average system-wide. You'll see variations within branches. But if you actually dive into specific branches, Parker Hill, for example, has much higher proportion of usage in their teen collection. Last year, 9.7% of their total circulation was teen. This year, it's up to 14% of their total circulation is teen material. So we look at these statistics, and this can really help us inform the collection decisions that we make. And it helps us to see who is or who isn't using our collections, particularly now when our access to our patrons are limited. It's really insightful to see how things have changed, who has learned how to use our system and who we still need to reach out to. And then next slide, please. I just wanted to talk about a few of our new online products. We've been focusing a lot on children's material. We know that so many of the kids across the city are doing remote learning. We also know that BPS issued Chromebooks to the students, so they actually have devices to take advantage of online content. So we've been focusing a significant amount of our collections budget on online resources for children. We've worked with the Boston Public Schools to identify ebooks to purchase and add to our collection, and we've added the 2 resources that I have up on the screen. Make is the first one. It has 300 Spanish language ebooks for children. These include picture books, read along, and interactive books. The interface and the searching are all in Spanish. And then BookFlix is the other product that's primarily in English. It's a literary resource, and it pairs videos with nonfiction ebooks. And it's aimed at younger kids from 3 to 9. And I can say for the 2 kids living in my house, it's a big hit. So I could talk about statistics forever, but I'm going to leave it there today and see if you have any questions for me.
Laura, I was just curious, what are the most popular collections being borrowed, both physically and digitally?
So fiction is definitely the highest. When you dive into that, mystery and romance tend to be the highest genres of fiction, or the highest used genres, depending the format. Romance is a little higher, but usually mystery is the top one of the fiction. But we've seen a big increase in fiction. We've also seen an increase in nonfiction too, which is surprising because that had been kind of steady or going down for a few years before now.
I think, Laura, when I last looked at these numbers with you last year, biography was particularly high within the nonfiction category. Don't know if that's still the case.
Yes, and that usage went up this year as well too, as a proportion of the total usage, because again, the entire usage of physical collections has gone down because of all of the limitations on service. But when you're looking at proportionally compared to others, biography is up as well.
But what about non-books among the special collections?
I did not pull any stats for our digital collections through Digital Commonwealth. I was focusing mostly on the circulating collection for this presentation. Okay. We continue to see that growing, and I can get you more statistics next time.
I don't have a question. I just want to really express my gratitude as a trustee to all the staff for this incredible work that you're all doing, and the commitment and the care that you demonstrate, not only to your colleagues, but also to the patrons and the residents of Boston. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing and continue to do under really challenging times.
Thank you all. And I think as we go forward, we'll continue to try and adjust procedures so we can balance this demand in the aggregate with the local needs for we shouldn't assume that just because these are what the numbers tell us that the physical collections are not important too. So we'll continue to make improvements and tweaks in that area. If I could move forward at this point, thank you, Michael, Laura, and Eamon, your teams. We'll move forward to the brief capital updates, which I will run through. Allison Ford, together with Lisa Schwab and Kelly Hall, are our major projects team. They're all in other meetings, I believe, this morning, working on the capital project. So I will present on Allison's behalf. Next slide, please. And Amanda, we'll run pretty quickly through these. So this is really one slide and one picture per project, just to refamiliarize yourself with the scope. The rare books renovation at the Central Library is on track and on schedule, and we will look to complete substantial construction later in 21 with a view to moving back in late in 21, possibly a public opening at the end of the year or the beginning of 22. We'll obviously update you more on that as we get closer. Next slide, please. The Johnson roof and one other Johnson project, the women's locker room for staff, were not projects we were able to do during the major construction project 5 years ago. And so we were able to have those move forward, and the Johnson roof replacement, luckily, is just wrapping up right now and looks great. As you can see, you don't often get to see the roof of the Johnson building, but here it is. Next slide, please. The Adams Street branch is on target. It looks fantastic if you ever drive by. This is new construction on the old site, and the tree is well preserved and endeared to the community. And so, so you see it in relief in this rendering here. We will have an opening ceremony of some sort, maybe a combination, maybe fully in person, fingers crossed, in late spring 21. This may be the record for the fastest branch built in the system, but we'll see when we cross the finish line, and give credit to our colleagues at Property and Construction Management Public Facilities Department for that. Next slide, please. And then just running behind is the interior and structural renovation of the Roslindale branch, which will probably be later spring, early summer of 21 for a reopening. In many cases, restoring it and improving its interior usage. Both of these projects, we had great participation from the local communities on both Adams Street and Roslindale, and some really strong, as with all branches, community meetings to improve the design and tweak things that were even more important to the local communities. Next slide, please. Hyde Park will open in back up in probably January, February. I don't have the exact dates in front of me. This was largely a structural branch waterproofing project on the lower levels, and some interior improvements on the lines of the refreshes we were able to do over the last 2 years. Not the full building, but in certain key areas. Next slide, please. We are proceeding with a restoration of the McKim fountain and courtyard area. Much more expensive than we thought, but when you're doing restoration work in a 19th century Art Deco, Beaux-Arts building, then that level of detail and diligence is really, really important.
I think we lost you, David. Pamela?
I suspect you'll have to log off and log back on.
Yeah.
Eamon, are you still there? Do you want to?
Yeah, I can continue on if we go to the next slide until David gets back. So
Thank
David referenced earlier the Johnson women's locker room project. Previously, we only had a men's locker room in the Johnson building. So this is bringing, restoring that. And we're just getting ready for construction. Next slide, please. So the Faneuil branch renovation, we're currently bidding. Design is complete, and it's a $14 million project. As you can see, there will be a new accessible entrance located on the left side of that Art Deco building. Next slide, please. So the West End programming study, this is combined, you'll see another slide later with Eggleston. We're doing both programming studies at the same time. We have had community meetings for each of those projects, and we're also working with the city to consider housing or housing with public assets on these two sites. So it would potentially be a mixed use development. And again, that's the early study phase. Next slide, please. Again, so same story here. We've had one community meeting, and we're currently in study at the Eggleston branch as well. Next slide. The McKim Master Plan, we've recently kicked off this project. This will be a master plan, so it'll be a full exploration of the building with a particular focus on the third floor, the part of the project that was never renovated in the early 90s. In addition, we're going to explore the plaza and the, making the entire building accessible. So that'll be, it's a really exciting project for the library and hopefully leading to future improvements to that building. Next slide, please. This is a project that you all had heard about probably about a year ago. We're currently wrapping up the design of a fire alarm panel. The panel for the McKim building was in disrepair. And again, we're hoping to move right into construction. We're just wrapping up design. Next slide, please. Codman Square programming study. We haven't officially kicked off this project. We're just completing the designer selection, but that will be a full community process. Again, the very early stages, the programming study where we'll define the requirements for a future Codman Square improvement. Next slide, please. So a couple of active projects. We're doing test fits for 2 different locations. One, the Chinatown branch, full renovation. There's a couple of development opportunities that we're considering for this particular branch in Upham's Corner. We've been working with the city and different partners on mixed use development for a new Upham's Corner branch. And then the remaining projects that are slated are the Research Collections Preservation Plan, Fields Corner Branch Design, North End Branch Study, and the South End Branch Study. I think that may be all of the slides. I will say this is an unprecedented, I said it earlier, but it's an unprecedented slate of projects for the organization and for the institution. Thanks to the entire organization and planning teams, but also the project management office in particular for guiding us through all of these projects. It's truly unprecedented, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I've noticed kind of being around town that without the traffic and everything, that these projects seem to be moving along a lot faster than one would normally anticipate. Is that true? Or
Not in every case. I would say there was a pause, when everything shut down, construction projects also shut down. So I think for all of our projects, they paused for about 2 months. But after they came back, construction projects were one of the first things to come back. And so I think they're moving faster. And I think we sort of have an opportunity to focus on all of these projects, which is with other things being shut down, which is giving us the opportunity to sort of work through all of these. But, the Johnson renovation project was one of the biggest things we did as an institution. I never thought we could really pull this much off at once. It's all really needed, and it's going to make the organization better.
Hello, Trustees.
Hey, minutes, Bob. Sorry. Just in general, with McKim, given where we are on scoping things out, what's the expectation that you'll have some sort of view of the next steps by when? Next year sometime, or can you just frame that? In other words, what kind of scope we'd be looking at if we wanted to go after the third floor of McKim?
Sure. So we expect to complete the study around September, October of 21. And I think we'll probably follow a similar process that we did with the Johnson project. So in other words, we'll complete the entire master plan. And it will have sort of a menu of items that we need to attack with pricing as well. And then we will move forward to try to identify the funds to be able to pull off the work. So when we did the Johnson project, we had the entire building in scope, or at least the public floors, but we didn't know that we were going to be able to do them all. And we ultimately did it in 2 phases. So we did the second floor first, and then we did the rest of the building. And I suspect that this will be a similar process.
Got it. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Amanda, can you please promote David Leonard?
And while you're doing that, Michael, you were going to add a comment. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that David asked me to move along to the next piece, but David's back, so we'll let him take over again.
Takes a couple minutes.
But Eamon, again, thanks to you and Allison and her teams as well. Just to echo what Zamal and others have said today, it's another example of just continuing to press ahead despite all the challenges. So thank you, and please relay that to Allison and her colleagues as well, please.
I will. We appreciate it, and we certainly couldn't do it without the library services and the rest of the operation or the institution that provides the inputs as well as the community feedback. So it's truly is a group and a team effort.
And David, are you back yet, or shall we move on to Ellen? Okay, I think he just wanted us to move forward. So Ellen was going to give us a report on the status of the FY21 budget and revenue.
Perfect, thank you. We had promised in September that we would take an opportunity in November to do a deeper dive on this year's budget. We knew that by the time we got to November, we'd have a little bit more information on where we were with the state budget and more information on our own costs. So if we could, we're going to cover the major costs, the major funding sources of the library. So if we could move to the next slide, please. When we met in May, we presented the mayor's FY21 budget, which at the time stood at $41.6 million. After that, with the final filing with the city council, they did reduce it by $250,000. We weren't part of that conversation and we were supportive of that change. It had two components to it, about $150,000 reduction in salary cost, which we thought would be attributable to a higher level of scrutiny on filling positions, particularly at the time we weren't open. And then $100,000 expected decrease for utility costs. The city manages utility costs central across the enterprise, so they have a lot of in-depth information on that. Subsequent to that time, because the heightened hiring standards and because we haven't had any overtime, people continue to leave, we don't replace them. Most recently, our payroll surplus is estimated at $500,000. And the city has updated its utility surplus to about $700,000. So we have a pretty significant surplus at this time. We do have one fairly significant exposure. When we opened in June, we did provide security at all branches. Typically, there's only a few branches that have security, and we have more security in the building now that we're open both for computer usage and for book pickup. We think it could be as high as 400,000, but that might come down a little bit, but we continue to monitor it closely. And if we could go to the next slide, please. The second major source for us of funding is state funding. The typical process for state funding is that the governor files House 1 in January, which happened this year before COVID response. The House and the Senate typically release in April and May. This year, the governor, no budget was passed. They went with a 1/12 operating budget for each month. The governor did revise his budget last month, and the House has recently submitted their budget. So right now, we are only awaiting the Senate. For Library for the Commonwealth, which is our largest state funding source, just under $3 million, the governor is keeping that level funded. The House recommends a slight increase to it at just over $3 million. So that's very good news for us. Typically the Senate is not lower than the House, so I think we have some pretty good signs. Half of that money goes to payroll for existing staff, and half of it goes to electronic databases, digital services, and that sort of thing. With state aid, which is a large pot of money that every library in the Commonwealth can apply for, if they meet certain metrics for how many hours they're open and how much they spend on their collections. The governor's budget was essentially level funded at just over $10 million. The House budget was level funded at $10,059,000. Based upon what we typically receive of that portion, we expect about $700,000. So that would be consistent with this year. And if we could go to the next slide, please. We wanted to talk about unrestricted revenue. We know that's a big area of concern for people. Unrestricted revenue is things that we use to pay all costs not covered by the city budget or through dedicated funding sources such as the affiliates or restricted trusts. It has four main components, which is state aid. Typically, we use that for all facility costs, unrestricted trusts, restaurant leases, and special events revenue. And if we could go to the next page, please. State aid and unrestricted trusts are stable this year, and then we will do a deeper dive on the leases and the special event revenue, which have, of course, been significantly impacted. Next page, please. So we shut down in March, as everyone knows. We lost the last quarter of FY20. If you look at this, you'll see that we have had a number of very good years, with the highest level at $1.7 million of special event revenue in FY19. The blue bar represents room rentals. So as folks know, if you take the second floor on a Saturday night, that's probably Abbey, it's Bates Hall, it's the lobby. And from that, we pay all the costs associated with the event. So day of course, there's security, there's HVAC, and there's custodians. The red bar represents the commissions. We take an 18% cut of the food sell by TCA up until $1 million, and then it goes up to 18.5%. So we've seen some pretty good increases. You can tell from the fourth bar that it's our big quarters are the first half of the year and then the final half of the year. So by closing in March, we didn't actually lose much for the first quarter because we didn't have much for the first quarter. We were, however, on track for a very good fourth quarter last year. I did not note in this because it doesn't fluctuate the rentals of the restaurants. Here in McKim, and that's the courtyard restoration that you can hear in the background. Here in McKim, it's $200,000 for the tea lounge and the tea restaurant. And over in Johnson, it's $135,000 for the Newsfeed Cafe. We do have one additional rental income at the Il Panino patio at the north end. And they did stay open. I think they had some period closed. They don't have a clause in their contract that allows them to suspend the rent. So we have continued to receive the $4,000 a month from Il Panino. I might stop there if there's any questions specific to the revenue, or we can take anything at the end. All right, why don't we go on? Next slide, please. Just to go over again some of the historical expenditures for unrestricted revenues. I think a lot of times people think it's just for the enhancements for the library. If we're doing a particularly high-end play down in RAB or that sort of thing, but it actually covers a lot of basic costs. Additional collection costs over the last 4 years, we've used about $600,000 for additional collections. Facility and fleet costs, for example, over the last few years, we've spent about $120,000 on snow removal. We use this for cleaning supplies. We had a big, as Eamon said, we had a big increase on cleaning supplies. Some of the good news on that, though, is that we think we might be eligible for FEMA reimbursement to the tune of about $85,000. Opening day costs, we had allocated about $15,000 for Roxbury for their first, for their opening, which is similar to what we did in JP, the bigger renovations, and other, security equipment. We replaced a lot of cameras last year for about $120,000. So it's really core to our spending. So then the next slide, please. From FY18 to 20, we spent about an average of $1.3 million year to date, and you can really see in this the difference when we're not open fully. We've only spent about $400,000, about $350,000 actually, and it's almost all for IT costs or facility costs. So where does that bring us with no more enterprise revenue for a little bit? We had been planning for the last number of years to put aside a pretty good surplus. We understood, as I think most people did, that the economy was somewhat overdue for a recession. We also knew that we had pretty good reserves going into FY15, and then we had a couple of tough years. We had to restore the mural, we had a presidential search, we had the mold outbreak, and we went through a lot of our reserves. So we've been working the last couple of years to replace those reserves to put us in a good position when we did have the inevitable downturn. We certainly never thought the downturn would be a full stop. on events. But as we look at this, we can tell you that we have a surplus from last year's unrestricted revenue of about $600,000. We have money that we have put aside to the tune of just under $1 million, unrestricted reserve, and we have a salary reserve of $460,000. Any of those we can put to any purpose. The salary reserve we actually had created during the years when we didn't have a fund director, because we wanted to make sure that we had enough money to pay for the staff associated that had previously been paid for the fund. We never needed that money, so now we have that available to pay for event staff. So I think I would hope the main takeaway from this is that we are in a pretty good situation with the lower level of services we're offering and a fairly robust surplus or reserve amount of money. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that. I guess in 9 months that was bound to happen eventually in the middle of a public meeting. My apologies. Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I don't know. We have one more component to present on, which is Paula Seki's update on the fund activity, which is a vital component to what Ellen just presented on. And Pamela, how are we looking at public comment? Are there one or two or a lot of people that would like to speak? Only one? Great, Mr. Chairman. So why don't we move forward with Paula's presentation? Obviously, the bigger budget conversation will be at the January meeting. This really is a status update for you. So why don't we ask Paula to go forward?
I think that's great, David. But Ellen, as I have with the other with your other peers, I think this last slide says a lot. Actually, in the last couple of slides, but the end of your presentation, it was prudent and prescient to have a rainy day fund, because as somebody else said, the governor of Connecticut this morning, Barnacle asked him, how are you going to get through this? The revenues are down. He goes, well, we have a rainy day fund and it's raining. So I think in a small way, we're in the same position, but thanks for your forward vision on that. And you're right, David, now that dovetails really well into Paula. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody. This is Paula Seki. I'm the new Executive Director for the Boston Public Library Fund. I do have some slides and we could probably go through. I'm going to be very quick just because of the time frame. So we can move through. We're in Chapter 2 of the Boston Public Library Fund, and we could please move to the next slide. So I am really just happy to be here, first of all, and thank you all for your good work in terms of governance for the Boston Public Library. And thank you to my trustees of the Boston Public, board members of the Boston Public Library Fund. We're in a really good place, thanks to the good work of my predecessor, Mary Myers, and the team that we have in place. Most of my time over the past few months, having started in June 15th during the pandemic, has been to really think about the infrastructure of the organization so that we can really build and professionalize on the good work that we do in fundraising and raising and enhancing the visibility of the important work of the Boston Public Library and investment. So we're a fully staffed team. I'm happy to report that. We've done a lot of hiring over the past several months, and you can see there's a team of full-time employees, 7 of us, and we also have a communications intern from Emerson College. So focusing in really specifically on key functional areas such as finance operations, individual giving, which is our annual giving program and our leadership annual giving program, our communications, which is really great. I encourage you all to go visit our website, which was relaunched in the summer, www.bplfund.org. And also really thinking about our corporate and foundation relations program so that we can be proactive versus reactive. And excited to welcome this team and to have them work with all of you as we move forward. Next slide, please. So we have, we've seen quite a lot of accomplishments over the past few months, and I'll just share with you some of these. They're all listed here. There's many more, but Some of the more important ones focus on the launch of our planned giving program, which I think is going to be very important to the future sustainability of the fund and the BPL. So we launched our 1848 Society, which recognizes those individuals who have included us in their estate plan. And we launched a full-fledged planned giving program with an integrated website. I encourage you all to go take a look at that. It's giftplanning.bplfund.org. And then one of the other exciting things that we've done and will continue to do is really focus on a multi-channel annual giving program and leadership annual giving program. And I'm really excited to share that as of today, we've encouraged 600 plus new donors to support the fund, as well as we've achieved unrestricted giving to date beyond what we did all fiscal year last year, and we're well on our way to achieving our $1 million goal in unrestricted giving, which is very, very exciting. And then just another note is around our board. Really very supportive, enthusiastic board, two of which members serve on this board, Bob Gallery and Jeff Hawkins, and thinking very strategically and carefully about how we diversify that board, reflecting, the variety of skill sets and professions in our community, as well as the demographics of the communities we serve. So very exciting work and a lot more ahead to really think about how we develop consistency, continuity, and confidence in the work of the fund and the library, and encouraging people to invest. So next slide, please. So we've had some great focus on restricted giving this year, and our priorities are around youth engagement, equity, some of the digital equity work that David spoke of earlier, as well as workforce development programming and some of the work in the branches, particularly the Roxbury branch with the new nutrition lab that's a part of that branch. So we've received some great support from individuals, foundations, and corporations, supporting our homework assistance program, which has been a very critical support for our families and children in these really unprecedented times of virtual learning. Wi-Fi hotspots for lending, as well as support for Wi-Fi around the exterior of some of our branches, and also support for enhancements to our anti-racist reading collection, as well as services and programs around financial and technical literacy and ESL programming. And tentatively, we have received an early commitment for support for programming and staffing for the nutrition lab in the new Roxbury branch, which I'm really, really excited about. So thank you to everyone for their work in supporting this important work of the library. Next slide, please. Well, that looks a little funky. So we are in startup mode, but we are quickly moving from the generous support of our capacity building funders to sustainability. And I am really excited to work with all of you as trustees of the Boston Public Library, as well as our affiliates with the Leventhal Map and Education Center, the associates of the Boston Public Library, our friends, groups, to really continue to broaden and expand the visibility of the Boston Public Library and the work we do, and to encourage investment at all levels. So thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions, but I am mindful of the time and can certainly talk offline. Just delighted to be here and honored.
David, I may have done that backwards because I don't think we actually did an appropriate introduction of Paula to this entire group. Nominating and governance, so apologies for the overlap with Cheryl and John and Ben and the rest of nominating governance, have heard from Paula, but this is, I think, your first real report out to us since joining us in June. And as you saw at the beginning of Paula's presentation, that chapter 1 was getting the fund restarted and having Mary Myers come in and do that, raising some capacity funding, which Paula alluded to enable that to happen, doing the gala, obviously, in the spring of 19. And then Mary, for personal reasons, came to David and me and Jeff and said she needed to transition. And then the entire world changed. But despite all that, we were able to relaunch a search this spring and find Paula. And she's just summarized what she and her team, first building the team was her first priority. And I would say the initial steps that Mary and the team, even smaller team, took to put us back on the road were extremely important and helpful. But Paula is really, and I do want to hand this back to David in a second, the right person to take us to the next level. So we couldn't be happier, speaking for the fund board and Jeff in his absence and David, to have Paula on board. We're lucky to get her, and despite the challenges of the environment we're all living through and every nonprofit is living through, I think we're continuing to demonstrate momentum. And one of the primary reasons for that is the importance of the library touching on so many different things that are important now and are going to be even more important coming out of the pandemic in terms of the priorities that Paul alluded to. So welcome. And since we're a week from Thanksgiving, anyone who can, we obviously have not had events or galas, and many of you were really great about helping last year to the extent that you could. Anyone who can do the 1848 Society or the Friends of the Courtyard, thank you. Please look at the fund website, and if you can support at that level or any level, it would send a very positive signal. So see, Paul, I even did a commercial for us. David, I'll hand it back to you.
And actually, I'm complete with my report. As promised, this was a lot of talking on our part, but we felt it appropriate to cover all these bases as we go forward with the trustees. So, Mr. Chairman, it's actually back to you, I think, for any new business or public comment.
Okay, last, I didn't want to cut off comments if any of the trustees have questions for Paula or anybody else who presented. Okay, then any new business? Paula, thanks again, by the way.
Forward the slide.
No new
There is-
business?
No.
Okay, thanks, Pamela. And so whether we will then go to public comment, is that correct? Or do I adjourn first?
No, we have 3 public comment. There is David Vieira first. We have Rachel Meiselman, and then next and last will be Yvette Giroux. That's it.
Great. Hi, David.
Amanda,
Good morning, trustees. Thank you for the meeting today. I'd like to thank the trustees, President Leonard and the mayor, for continuing to move forward on the branch library projects during this challenging economic time. I had occasion to attend the initial meetings at both the West End and the Eggleston branches the last few weeks. And the trustees need to know that the public is fully engaged and excited about these projects and looking forward to next steps and continuing on through renovation. I'd also like to thank the trustees for honoring Marlene at the South End branch. Marlene and I have worked together for many years, and it's wonderful to see her honored in that way. I'd like to make a brief comment about the collections. Many of the branch friends groups have been working with their branch librarians to see if there can be some kind of loosening up of the restrictions that the branch librarians have in adding to the collections in the local neighborhoods. Many of them are not able to bring gift books into the collection without a lot of red tape. And there are a lot of patrons who find that the only way that they can appreciate their library is to make donations to their branch in honor of people who have passed or for a special event. So I know President Leonard has received letters of support for that from the various branch friends groups, and I hope that something can happen so that those restrictions can be loosened up a little bit. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a pleasant Thanksgiving.
Next is Rachel Misselman. Are you there? Amanda? If not, can we please move on to Yvette Giroux? Are either of them there? Amanda, can you comment if you're putting them in?
Yes, I do not see Yvette.
Okay, that's fine.
I've unmuted. It looks like Rachel is unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything. But she seems.
I'll
to
just
be
make
here.
some brief comments based
Here.
upon what these individuals have submitted via the chat. I'll acknowledge David Vieira's question about collections. There's a robust and thorough dialogue going on between branch staff and collection development about improving our ability as a system to support the needs of the patrons both throughout Boston and Massachusetts, while continuing to put a focus on physical collections at branches. That conversation is ongoing, including with our librarian union. In terms of Rachel's comment in chat, the mixed use exploration through several of the capital projects continues to be ongoing. The two that are in active consideration with programming studies are the Eggleston and West End branch programming studies. And we anticipate that future programming studies will also always ask the question. Not every site will be feasible or possible for a variety of reasons, but we continue to look at that option. And mixed use in the context of Boston usually means with exploring the possibility of housing and specifically affordable housing. With respect to the John Adams question with the Quincy's mayor, the trustees directed us to do some additional research on this matter and the legalities pertaining to that matter, and we that work is ongoing, and we'll report back to the trustees at a later date. And thirdly, with respect to the anti-racism book list, that can be found on our website by going to the catalog search, selecting list, and inputting a keyword that you would like. There are actually a couple of lists that are responsive to that, but certainly the main one, which is now being supported by an anonymous foundation's gift, is front and center there. And I know Yvette wanted to just thank the trustees for passing the vote to name the South End Community Room after Marlene Niehaus. So we'll be moving forward on that front.
And I did have another question, David.
Oh, great.
It's Yvette, and it's, I noticed on the slide for the upcoming capital projects that I think it was the North End was the price tag on the study was 1.5 million, and the study for the South End was 100,000. And I was wondering about that disparity.
Yeah, so those the North End number is an old number that reflects both a programming study and partial design, and so the majority of the work in recent years when it comes to program study as a standalone is generally in the $75,000 to $100,000 price range. So we would presume that those would start there, and with successful programming studies, real design numbers would actually be proposed in a future year's budget. So a previous budget cycle.
Great, thank you.
That concludes.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I usurped your question session.
Nope, not at all. Thank you. And Pamela, we're all clear, right? So with that, I want to thank all of the trustees. I will, without further ado, any other comments or observations from the trustees? All right, well, without further hesitation, I know we ran over a little bit, but there was a lot to cover. So thank you all for your time. I wish each of you and your families the best for the beginning of the holidays, and well, actually all the holidays, since we won't convene again until the middle of or the second week in January. So the best to all of you. Be well, stay well, and thank you for all of your support of the library. And to any of the team that's left on, still listening as well, we want to wish the same to you and your families. And once more, thank you for all your work during this very challenging period. So all the best, and see you in January.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Larry.
Bye, everybody.